Please welcome Dr. Valerie Purdie Greenaway.
We women know about these shoes. I never wear them, I just pulled them out for today. Good morning. So I am a scientist, I'm a professor at Columbia, and my job today is to help us think a little bit about the architecture of implicit bias and stereotypes. And I want to start off with a thought experiment. So I need your brains for the next few minutes. So imagine that a woman and a man decides that they want to start a tech company, and they head out to Silicon Valley. Now, we know that 90% of tech companies fail. And now, you sort of randomly assign either a woman to come back to New York, they now have to get a job in a firm, or a man has to come back and they have to get a job in a firm. So we know that they have both failed, although they tried hard. The question is, which person is more marketable? Is the woman more marketable, or is the man more marketable, knowing that they both failed at this startup tech venture? So now when I ask my students this at Columbia University, they usually think they're really clever, because that's what they think they do. And what happens is they say, it's absolutely the man is more marketable. Well, research shows that that's actually not true, and stereotypes are at the heart of what actually happens. Because there is a very strong link between women and likability, people think that the woman, there's no way she would go out to Silicon Valley unless she was innovative and ambitious, and that she's going to be a great powerhouse back in our company. But for men, there isn't a link between maleness and likability. So people think, well, why did he start a startup company? That's because he can't get along with anybody in the company here. We don't want him here because he's going to cause all kinds of commotion. So here's a case where stereotypes are powerful, they're pervasive, but they're situational. And that is what I want to share with you today, that the heart of our challenge is to reimagine, but yet deeply understand how stereotypes affect us. So I want to give you a very simple definition of what is implicit bias. That is the lens through which we're going to understand stereotyping and bias. There's lots of explicit racism, sexism out there, but we're going to talk about that at a different conference. Okay. So implicit bias are unintended, subtle, and completely unconscious attitudes and decisions made by everyone all the time. And we know that the human brain can take in 11 million pieces of information at any one time, but we're only consciously aware of maybe 40 of these at best. So bias is a natural, normal, and adaptive way that brains conserve energy and storage space. We don't have mind bugs. Implicit bias is the way our brains operate, but that's one of the reasons why we need to have lots of understanding of what it is and ways to mitigate its effects. Now, many of you in this room probably know how implicit bias is studied. There's lots of different ways. This is called the implicit association test, which takes links between categories like women or femaleness and maleness and link them with things that are stereotype consistent, like family and career. But we're not going to do this. I want to just have you do another little kind of exercise to illuminate the power of how our minds work. So the next 3 slides demonstrate how fast our brains are when concepts match and how slow our brains are when concepts do not. So those of you who have a cell phone or you're Snapchatting or whatever it is you young people do, put it away because I need both of your hands. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. I want you to state the colors as fast as you can. I'm going to model for you. So this is red, blue, green, yellow. Okay? Simple enough, no tricks. Number 2, let's do it together. Yellow, red, blue, red. Blue, yellow, red, green. I see everyone's had their coffee, so we're gonna take it up a notch. Here we go. Red, blue, green, yellow. Yellow, green, blue, red. Green, red, yellow, blue. Now, I'm not going to have you sing it, but we're going to do it really loud now. Ready? Here we go. What happened? Where'd all that coffee go? Well, we're gonna try it again. Okay. One more time. You really focus, you might be able to get it. Yep. Okay. So what happened here? This is not a media mistake. What happened is that we just saw something powerful in real time about how our brains work. We just saw how fast our brains are when concepts match, and we just saw how our brains are when concepts do not match. And when we think of embracing ambition, our idea is to disrupt the links between gender and all of the other negative stereotypes that are out there. So what are a few things that I'd like to share about stereotypes? Well, one thing that we know is that gender stereotypes can emerge at a very young age. By the age of about 2.5 years old, boys and girls are able to associate toys with gender, boy stuff and girl stuff. Now, does it predict anything? Not particularly, but then something interesting happens by the time young people are in high school. So forgetting is a very powerful way that our brain tries to conserve energy and space. And one of the things that research shows is that when you have young people, particularly young men and women, take art classes in high school, boys are actually more likely to forget and misremember how they did in art. When they get a B or an A, they actually think they got a C. They misremember it in a negative way. And girls are quite accurate. If they got an A, that's what they remember. But when it comes to math, it's the exact opposite. Now what happens is the boys accurately remember the grade that they get, and the girls misremember in the same direction. When they got an A, they misremember and think they got perhaps a B or a B minus. All of a sudden, implicit bias starts to take hold. So perhaps you might have last night been, ordering some food on Amazon, or perhaps you're buying some nice Tory Burch bags or what have you. And then you go, I want to say something about my children. I'm going to just type something into Google to see how they're doing compared to everyone else. Well, as it turns out, implicit bias is so powerful that you can actually use data scraping methods to see a very particular and disturbing pattern of what parents put and type into Google. Research shows that parents ask Google if their sons are geniuses and if their daughters are overweight. And in fact, if you look at the question, is my son overweight? For every 10 US Google queries about boys being overweight, there are 17 queries of that about young women. Even more powerful, the question, is my daughter gifted? For every 10 US Google queries about girls being gifted, there are 25 queries about boys. What you think you're doing individually in your home, at your offices, is actually a powerful cultural construction that we need to deconstruct and disrupt. How does that play itself out later on? These are the kinds of things that I hear in boardrooms all the time when I'm working with companies all over the world. The idea that because the cult of genius is associated with boys, what happens is women are seen as the risky choice. We hear things like, she needs one more year. We're going to promote her, but not now, not today. And you hear this over and over and over again, the higher and higher up we climb. We also know that implicit bias gives us this very narrow idea of what women are, and it's so encouraging to see the broad spectrum of women here today. But what we know is when we think of women, we tend to think of whiteness and straightness. So a white woman is seen as the norm, and every other kind of woman is seen as non-prototypical. In the context of race and ethnicity, what we see is that when we think of a minority, we think of black, straight men. So once again, black women, women of color, are non-prototypical, or black gay men or men of color are non-prototypical. One of the ways we need to disrupt stereotypes is to bring a larger idea of who women are. Why does this all matter? I spend a lot of time in my laboratory studying the effect of stereotypes. And what we find is that our brains are doing double duty when we're in workplaces where gender stereotypes exist. There's powerful research on stereotype threat, the idea that it's a worry or concern about being perceived through the lens of a negative stereotype in the minds of other people. This worry and concern can place an undue burden on members of underrepresented groups. And there's powerful research that when you randomly assign to college students at the very height of their mathematical abilities to come into the laboratory and they're taking very difficult math tests, we can turn on and off stereotypes in the lab to show how pervasive they are. On the y-axis here, higher numbers means test score on a typical math test. And what we find is that when we have the standard test conditions, the test conditions when you take an LSAT, your accounting exam, your Barbizon beauty school exam, anything that's quantitative, and you are just in these standard test conditions, what's baked into it is stereotypes. You see here on this side where it says the standard test conditions, men tend to outperform women 3-to-1. But when you simply turn off the stereotype by saying there happens to be no gender differences on this particular test, you see complete gender parity. Women and men are performing exactly the same. So when I think about the power of stereotypes, I also think about the power that scientists have to turn them on and off in the laboratory, in companies, in government agencies. But what the knowledge is that we offer you is to find ways to turn the stereotype off. And that, to me, is what this moment is about. So when I think about embrace ambition, my hope for all of you is that when you are looking at all of the powerful people around the stage, you're thinking about the context around you. You're looking at the person next to you. Because the way stereotypes get broken is when we include everyone. When we think of the single person as someone who's a role model, it's much less effective than thinking about the totality of everyone. Social context matters. So with that, I want to thank you, and I hope you all embrace ambition today. Thank you.